Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, where you join me on the desert island paradise of Pelagos. This is a planet with a number of interesting features, which we're going to take a look into in this video, along with how Sophia has been leading us in despoiling it. The first thing that makes this planet very, very unusual is the role of electricity. So we landed on this planet and to start off in more or less our standard way, where Tristan slapped down a huge number of solar panels to generate lots and lots of power, and we're using the special foliac solar panels that produce 5 times the amount of power of the normal ones, so we've got a bit of extra power there, and we've put down some accumulators to keep us running overnight, although we've discovered not remotely enough accumulators, but you know, still a few. However, this is not such a great thing, because on Pelagos, the type of pollution we have to deal with is electromagnetic waves, and those are produced by any sort of electrical machine. Solar panels are particularly bad because they emit pollution all of the time rather than just when they're running, and these are, as you can see over there on the right, emitting 5 electromagnetic waves per minute. The assembly machines over here are releasing 6 1/4. However, that's not quite as bad because most of the time they're not actually running, but still it's not great. And then we've got another 1 per minute coming out of these mining drills, 0.6 coming out of the smelters down here. So you see, all of these things, we've come in here and we've done our normal thing, which is just start building up with all kinds of electrical buildings, and that's not been great. And if we zoom out a bit and turn on the pollution view, you can see that we've created an enormous splotch of pollution already, and that's from what I would describe as quite a small factory. Yet, because we're using solar to generate the electricity, and because we're using quite a lot of electricity, it's absolutely filthy. And so one of the important things we're going to be doing as we expand on this planet is removing as many electrical buildings as we can. Now, there are a few that are more or less essential to a functioning modern factory, things like roboports, so we're going to be keeping those in, and those are going to carry on using electricity. But all of the assembly machines, all of the inserters, the drills, and many other things around this planet, we're going to be able to replace with diesel-powered machines, and we'll get onto those a bit later. I think one of the short-term major improvements we're going to be able to make to the pollution emissions is going to be to switch over to burner power generation, because at least those will only be active when they actually need the power. So if we can start burning all of the coconut husks and the wood that we're getting from these trees down here, which again I'll talk about a bit more in the next chapter, if we can start burning those to generate electricity instead of using solar panels, that's going to be enormously cleaner, and it feels very weird to say that. But generating power that way is going to massively reduce the amount of pollution we release, and hopefully allow this to be pulled back in a bit further. The problem we've had, and the reason that we've gone in like this, is because with there being 5 of us working on this planet, we tend to want to get things set up and running very quickly. So rather than waiting for this planet to start producing things like the various fuels you need and the diesel-powered machines, it's a lot easier just to drop things in from space. So we're producing loads and loads of machinery on Norvis, things like the assembly machines and the chemical plants and so on and so on. And we've got the advanced chemical plants from Corundum, we've got belts and things, and we're dropping all of this in on the planet so we can build up nice and quickly without having to faff around wait for things to be built. But it does mean we're using the wrong, in heavy inverted commas there, we're using the wrong type of buildings on this planet, and it's causing a lot of extra pollution. This is quite interesting. So a lot of other planets we've been to, like Foliax for example, has its own tech, and it's trying to encourage you gently to use that tech. And there's a lot of stuff over here, like there's the arcane agricultural towers, which we didn't use because there was no incentive to, we might as well just use the electrical ones. And the arcane-powered hybrid processor and furnace and assembly machine and so on. All of these machines are designed for use on Foliax, but because we dropped in here with all the modern tech from Norvis and every other planet, we went, well, I don't care, why don't we just use normal assembly machines, stick in a big nuclear reactor over here and some solar panels to power it, and it's easy. And so we did that, and it sort of took things away from the intended feel of Foliax. But over on Pelagos, there's a strong disincentive to use all of this electrical machinery, and so we're going to end up looking into the diesel stuff and having a play around with it and seeing how it works. And if I skip forward a week, so an extra stream ahead, because we've actually been making some progress, you may notice over here that now the things look a little bit different. Our mall area is now running on methane gas, which is being pumped into diesel assembly machines, being passed all the way through along here. So these are now diesel assembly machines, which don't produce any electromagnetic radiation. And then all of our inserters, and they're really hard to see, but all of our inserters are now also diesel-powered ones. So they're running off, once again, running off the methane that's being pumped through these pipes, and that enables them to run, once again, without producing any pollution. We do still have quite a lot of solar panels over here, and if we take a look at in here, we can see that we are using quite a lot of power for roboports, and there's still 11 assembly machines scattered around that we need to deal with. And some other things that are using up electricity and therefore causing us to generate quite a lot of pollution. But it's a big step in the right direction, and if we can start moving over to burner power generation, then hopefully things will be a lot better. And conveniently, much like real-world diesel engines, the diesel assemblers and inserters and so on can be tuned to run off almost any type of hydrocarbon. So we're running them off methane at the moment on this island because we had a convenient supply of that available. But if we look down here, we've got these inserters running off coconut oil instead, which is an alternative to hydrocarbon that we're generating on this planet, and that works just as well. And there are a number of other different fuels that can be used. We're looking into ethanol at some point in the future, but for now, running off these two, depending on where something is and what it's working on, is working extremely well for us. So this is coming together nicely. Pelagos has a number of different resources that we can take advantage of. The most obvious is of course water. There's plenty of that, so we can just pull that out of the oceans with the offshore pumps as normal. So that's something we're not going to be short of. Then there's patches of iron ore scattered around on a few of the islands. So we've got 1.2 million there. There's a little patch of about 400,000 there. There's a massive one of 31 million up here, and there's a few others scattered around. So iron ore is not too much of a problem. We're going to be able to obtain that without too much difficulty, which is a good thing because all of the diesel machines that we're trying to make over here use enormous quantities of steel, a lot of it in the form of the engine units here, which are then taken up to make things like a diesel inserter, which requires some sealant, and that's fun to make because that requires a lot of coconut oil. But then we need the engine units and some burner inserters and a load of pipe, so there's a lot of iron going into producing things over here, and that's been a bit of a bottleneck for us in the time we've been playing. There's also patches out in the ocean of methane and titanium sludge, so I think titanium is going to be the big exciting resource for this planet, the one that we're going to make science packs out of, the ones that we're going to be making things out of to ship off to other planets, basically the big exciting thing that's going to come from here. But in the meantime, I think the methane is going to provide a useful fuel for a lot of things. We saw how eventually we're getting a lot of our mole running off that, for example, and then the iron ore is useful. Oh, and then we can actually obtain stone as well by ripping up parts of the island. So there is a system where you can turn spoilage into this stuff, which is an excavatable surface marker. And if you drop that down on land like we've done here, then you can put in one of these excavators and that will dig the area you've marked up out of the ground and then dump it, in this case, into a chest where it can then be taken off to be used for whatever else you might require stone for. So that's a weird resource, and we'll have another look at that later on when we can see one that's actually running. But the most interesting resource we've played with so far has probably got to be the coconuts. And these are, well, they're a plant, so as you'd imagine, they can be grown by agricultural towers. And we started off using normal, in inverted commas, agricultural towers. That's what you got from Gleba. And then we realised that they were producing quite a lot of pollution. They're using electricity, so they were bad. So we switched over to the diesel version of those, which can then be fuelled by pumping in any kind of hydrocarbon. And at the moment, we're trying to pump in some of the coconut oil, but unfortunately, the system has run dry over here, and this entire system has stalled. Also, this isn't ideally placed because it's taking up quite a lot of space on this island that we're trying to use as a sort of a primary factory. And so I've moved off and started building up a coconut plantation on a different island over here in the off to the southwest. And this one, you can see, is running really nicely. We've got the diesel agricultural towers chugging away in here, planting the seeds and then pulling up the trees when they're ready. The coconuts are then being passed up out over here, where they can be passed into coconut processors, and we're using biochambers here because, once again, they're not an electrical building. Biochambers are powered by nutrients, so there's no electricity required there. And we're powering all the various inserters that are keeping the system running off the coconut oil, which can be produced in this area, and therefore is a really good resource to be using over here as fuel. And so this island is completely self-contained. All of the inserters, all the machinery is running off the coconuts, which are being grown here and then processed. And processing a coconut produces three very useful resources. We get out the coconut seeds, which can be sent off to be grown into additional coconuts, and I believe one coconut seed grows into a tree which provides 10 coconuts. And so you'll notice that 9% there is a little bit low. However, because we're doing this in a biochamber, we get the extra 50% productivity, so actually it's sort of a 13.5% chance of getting a coconut seed back in the long run. So that's good enough to keep the system running. So we're getting about 35% extra over the seeds that we're using, and that means we're gradually filling up, and it's enabling us to plant more and more coconut trees to the point where eventually we're hoping to be able to start using these two towers down here as well to expand out a bit further south, as well as the the seeds, you also get out the coconut meat and the coconut husk. The coconut meat is probably the most valuable part of it. That we're feeding most of that into the biochambers up here. Some of that is being made into nutrients to keep all of the biochambers running, so that's working very, very nicely. And then anything spare after that is then being turned into coconut oil, which is keeping the whole system around here running, keeping these towers powered, and enabling everything to just carry on working. Fortunately, once again, this is also a net positive production system, and so we're able to produce a bit of extra coconut oil that's going into the tank up here, and then when the tank gets full enough, we're passing it through over here where we're making sealant. And sealant is a very, very valuable product for making most of the stuff on this planet. Sealant is used in making all of the diesel inserters, all of the bulk diesel inserters, diesel pumps, diesel buoys, boats, and so on and so on. It goes into pretty much all of the equipment that's required on this planet. So one of the reasons I came out here to build this system was because I knew we were going to need a lot of sealant, and I wanted to start making that in larger quantities. A certain amount of the husk is also used in making the sealant, so you use some coconut husk along with the coconut oil, but we have a lot of excess husk, and I'm just currently flowing that through down here where it can then be burned off in the burner towers down here in order to generate heat, which currently isn't being used for anything, but at least it disposes of the excess. We also get a certain amount of wood out of harvesting the trees as well, and that's being fed up through a belt along here and also then being passed off just to be burned at the moment. So this is a very, very early system. It needs a lot of improvement. For one thing, the area over here is not remotely big enough for the quantity of coconut I would like to have it processing, and also we're wasting a lot of resources coming through here. And also, we're not actually doing anything particularly useful with the sealant we're making. So this needs expanding and finishing off. And during the next stream, that's exactly what I did. So in hindsight, I started a bit too far up this island. I should have left a bit more space at the top. But fortunately, through the magic of landfill, both the normal traditional landfill and the wooden platform that you're allowed to build on Pelagos, I've been able to expand out a bit. And you can see here, there is now significantly more machines doing the coconut processing, more machines making the coconut oil, and then more machines making the coconut oil as well, because that is a very valuable resource. So landfill is a slightly funny one. On this planet, you're only allowed to put the landfill down on the shallow water. So I could put some in there, for example, because the slightly darker water there is shallow. But as we get a bit further away from the island, suddenly I'm not able to put it in up here. This just won't happen. This is deep sea, and there you need to use the wooden platform instead. So great, okay, we can make the wooden platform. That's actually easier because we've got so much wood on this planet. However, the wooden platform is quite limited. Essentially, in a nutshell, the only things you can really put on the wooden platform are logistic stuff, so pipes and belts, chests, and turrets, except by the looks of it. You can also put combinators on wooden platforms, but since you can't put any kind of pylon on there to power them, this is quite limited. But the rest of it, essentially you're allowed to support logistic stuff on it, but you can't put pumps on it, so, and I suspect that's to prevent you from running a really, really long pipe from one island to another and then having the diesel pumps every so often along it just to keep it running. And unfortunately, it's also a bit funny about splitters, so I wasn't able to put any splitters on there. You're also not allowed to use any underground belts, and so you have to make sure you can actually run the belts wherever you want. And that's why here I've got the splitter, swapping the coconut meat and the coconut husks over, because I want to split the coconut meat off to go up here, rather than just splitting it the other way and then having an underground pipe in, which is a little bit weird. But, you know, it works, so I guess we'll go with that. But it's a bit weird. There's a lot of restrictions in this as to where you're allowed to put certain things. Anyway, so the expansion has continued. We now have significantly more machines over here producing sealant. And once again, we're still only pumping the oil through when there's quite a lot in these tanks, because I don't want to get into a position where we don't have enough oil to keep running the agricultural towers, because that would be very, very bad to have them cut out. So we're topping this up, and when these tanks go above 3,000, then we'll pump a little bit out through to here. That's why we're seeing this sort of flickering on the power over here, with them sometimes working and sometimes not, depending on how much fuel they've got available. Hopefully, eventually, we'll produce enough of the sealant and then of the oil that things will start to back up a bit and things can run a bit more cleanly over here. But for now, this is a limitation that we have. And so, over here, we are producing, yes, a quantity of the oil, which is being brought down to some barreling machines over here. So if a ship, and we'll talk about ships a bit more later, if a ship turns up with some empty barrels, they can be passed down here, filled up with coconut oil, and then put back onto the ship. We've also got the sealant coming through from the production system here. It's coming along a belt, this belt that goes down under here and then passes it through all the way up and then into the ship over here. And we're also producing a quantity of activated carbon, because that's another resource that's required. And so that's produced by bringing the coconut husks or the wood in over here, where they can be burned a first time to turn them into coal, they can be burned a second time to turn them into carbon, and they can be burned a third time to turn them into activated carbon. And that's all done in the calciners, which is another new machine for this planet. And so with that, we've got a dribble of activated carbon coming through here that can be fed up and put into the storage system to be shipped away. And so this island is capable of producing 3 valuable resources. We've got the coconut oil that's shipped out in barrels, we've got the sealant that's just shipped out as a product, and we've got the activated carbon. At the moment, all of those are being put into the same ship because ships are enormous, and so once it's full, we'll send it off and unload it on the main island and see how things go from there. You'll notice we've got quite a lot more coconuts being grown than before, so we've gone from having 2 agricultural towers that were growing really well and then 2 waiting, to having 6 that are growing really nicely, and then there's further expansion intended down here, but this is currently still a work in progress. But this is basically a direct copy and paste of the system we've got up here, except it's not got the sealant production. This is just going to start producing the coconut oil and then pumping that out into the same systems that we've already got, and as an extra source for that oil. And hopefully this will make a big difference and allow us to run a lot more productively. The hope is that in the long term, this island will produce enough coconut-based resources, so the 3 that I mentioned, in order to keep the other island happy, and therefore we're going to be able to remove these coconut plantations from here and just have the system happily consuming all of the coconut products that are brought in, rather than having to generate them locally. Because as you can see, essentially this area is doing all of the coconut stuff, and that's a lot of space that's been taken up. If we could free that up and use it for other things, that would be very much appreciated. I mentioned earlier how we had a nice patch of iron ore on this island, and we're mining that up. That has now been upgraded to use the diesel mining drills, because these are much cleaner, and we're unloading all of that iron ore into a red chest by the looks of it. And from there, not a lot is happening, because we've tapped an additional small iron patch over here of a mere 36,000, but that's enough to get things going for the time being. And that's being passed up here and going into calciners, which are then able to cook that iron ore into iron plates. It's okay, it's coming out as hot iron plates. We've got some cooling chests over here. And then we've got a nice steady supply of iron coming through here, which we can then feed down to make it to cook into steel. Now these are some old systems that should probably be removed now, because they're electrical furnaces. Down here we've got another set of calciners, which are essentially the diesel-powered furnaces on this planet, and they are using the activated carbon that's being made from the coconuts in order to then produce steel in a significantly more efficient way. So I believe this system is the one that has priority, and these will only be used if we have a shortage. And so for now, these are working well, and they are producing all of the steel, hopefully all of the steel that we need. And if we look over here, we can see this chest, yes, is filling up quite nicely with cold and hot metal, but eventually the hot metal cools, and we can then start taking that away and feeding it into all the machines over here that are voraciously tucking into that steel and churning through it. Our stone production has expanded somewhat. You can see this island here, you can sort of tell by the shadow of the shallow water here, but this island used to come out to about here. But we've been churning through it with the diesel excavators over here, and gradually chomping our way through the stone, through the island, in order to turn it into stone like this. And that stone we can then take away and use for very important things, such as over here, where we're making it into sand to enable us to make concrete. And we've been needing large quantities of refined concrete in order to produce a lot of the buildings over here. So that's another thing where we're requiring lots of resources to be pulled in. And these, currently we're using big crushers. We will at some point probably switch over to either steam or burner crushers, because we can run those without using electricity. But in the meantime, we've got a load of stone coming in, we've got some iron ore coming in, and that's allowing us to make the concrete in order to go into various buildings, like oil rigs, for example. And hopefully in the medium term, we'll switch over to using diesel assembly machines here as well, because these are quite polluted, quite dirty, and are going to cause us problems in the long run. But as you can see, we have moved a lot of the equipment on this island over away from using electricity. And if I zoom back out again and turn the pollution scale on, you can see that, yeah, okay, we do still have quite a big pollution blob coming out here. But it's at least, I think it's probably stopped growing. Things are better than they were before, and hopefully this will start to gradually shrink and come back inwards. I think it might have been starting to shrink a bit, because all of the enemy bases out here do seem to be sort of a few chunks away from the edge of the blob. And that makes me think we probably went out and defended the pollution cloud, and then the pollution cloud has retreated a little bit. So I think we might be cleaning up our act a little bit. We'll see how it goes. We'll have to revisit this after another stream and see how things are getting on, and how much cleaner we've got in that time. Okay, that's introduced you to a couple of the major resources on Pelagos. We've talked about how we're dealing with iron and how we're dealing with coconuts, and I feel like those are two of the main things that we have to play with so far. But in the next video, we'll talk about the titanium and the methane, because quite a bit of headway has been made on those. Those are also valuable resources, and we've been doing stuff with them. So please come back for the next video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. If you'd like to give Pelagos a try yourself, then you could just grab its mod, or you could grab the entire Planetary Pioneers mod from the Factorio mod portal, and that will give you all of the planets we've been playing with, and all the quality of life mods as well. If you then use the seed 11111, you should end up playing in the same universe as us, so you'll see some very, very familiar looking planets, and you'll be able to play along and go off and investigate and see if you can do what we've been doing, but better. If you do give it a shot, please come along to the Discord and let us know how you're getting on. It's always nice to see how people are doing with it. We'll be back on next Monday at 7:30 PM UK time for another stream where we'll be going out and making further headway into Pelagos and finding out how things go with the various different resources we've got here. I'll also be back on Wednesday where I should be playing something else. So what that's going to be is a little bit up in the air at the moment because I've finished my current Foundry playthrough, and therefore I'm trying a few other little things here and there before I start the next big series. So come along to that, there's bound to be something fun happening, and it may well be Factorio related. These videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday as well, so please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of them. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.